Hey everyone, so I am hopping on live very early. I'm just really excited to talk about this. And today's turning out to be a little crazy, so schedule change. But instead of wine, we've got some Starbucks this morning. Woohoo! So last week we did the Literacy-Based Therapy Challenge, and so many SLPs rocked it and walked away with amazing therapy plans, fabulous ideas. I learned so much, and it was awesome. But we got a lot of questions about how to take data in context. Like, how am I supposed to collect data in mixed groups when I'm managing 5 million other things, and it's just different from our typical drill, so it makes it harder to figure out how to take that data. So I wrote a blog post this week that just has general strategies when it comes to kind of implementing literacy-based therapy with mixed groups, and we've got some general strategies there, and I will link to that blog post in the description up top. And one of the pieces would include some tips to set up a good data system, but I've been getting a lot of questions about it, so I thought we could chat for a minute. Like I said, it can feel really overwhelming because you're targeting things in context, and oftentimes we write our goals to be, like, we want them to be very specific, measurable, and we want to have a very consistent way to measure that progress, and oftentimes in context it's hard to collect that. And so I'll talk about ways to collect very clean data using probes, and then I'll talk about strategies to still collect data in context, and then I'll talk about how I combine the two and have a good combination. And I'm always open to feedback and suggestions, and I'd love to hear what you guys are doing too, because together we can rock this thing and figure it all out. So the first option is to take more structured data. And in grad school, like we learned, we can do that using probes. So most of my students have about 3 goals, and so the system that I came up with was just to rotate between the goals, and I would collect a quick probe. So if I see them 3 weeks in a row and they have 3 goals, I would take probe data on goal 1 on week 1, probe data on goal 2 during week 2, and goal data on goal 3 during week 3, and then on week 4 I jump back to goal 1 and kind of jump through that way. And that way I have really clean, consistent data using those probes. And there are tons of options out there for quick little probes that you can take. For a while, I was just, whenever I had a new goal for a student, I just write a quick probe out, and I tried to make it leveled according to the student's needs and all of that. But I would just take an index card and write a couple things, and then a lot of times I had overlapping goals, so I was able to use that index card to collect probe data for multiple students, and that would be interesting to kind of compare and see how things are doing. And so that's how I set that up. And then I just have the index cards at my table and I just rotate through them. If you're using a pocket chart kind of thing, you can put the mini probes in each student's pocket too, and then that kind of helps keep track of things for you. So that's one strategy that I use to get that clean data. If you don't love the idea of making your own, the SLP Now membership, like when I set up my therapy tote, I have a binder of assessments, and these weren't, like, here's an example of one. So these weren't designed necessarily to be probes. They're meant more for dynamic assessment, but they have targets that you can use for probes if you're looking for some inspiration. And we did level them and do research and all of that to find the most appropriate targets. Another option, there are tons and tons of different probes on Teachers Pay Teachers, and they might not be labeled as probes, but that's another option as well. So you can make your own, use the SLP Now ones, look on Teachers Pay Teachers, and I know there's 5 million other ways to put together probes too. So that's the first step that I use. So I get that probe data, and then taking 1 minute or so per student, I just run through that really quickly at the beginning, and then we jump into the therapy piece. Oh, and we got to back up a second, because a lot of you were saying, okay, that sounds awesome, I can do that, but what do I do when I have goals that involve reading a reading passage? Because that takes a longer time. So for the goals related to summarizing and things like that. So if that's the case, there's a couple different options. You can record the reading passage if the student can't read it on their own, or you can just have the student read the passage while you're working with the other students, so that when you get to him or her, then you can just run through whatever goal you're targeting. Another option is if you have multiple students with goals like that, have them read a reading passage and do it together and then run through the probes, and just batch those types of goals so you can get all the data and kind of maximize your time that way. So those are some solutions for that problem. And then now we can jump into taking data in context. So I created a little rubric that I use to be consistent, and it includes all of the different types of support and scaffolding that I might provide a student with. And I assign, there's a way to find the numerical value, just so it's a little bit more consistent and I can use the same type of wording, and it just makes things a little bit easier. So that's what I do, and then I can describe what level of support the student needed with that particular skill. So if they're working on defining words using context clues, I can describe whether they needed visual supports or whatnot. And because I have that rubric, it just makes it really easy to describe how they're doing. And then I can see over time how they're doing. And the only problem with that is 1 week we might be reading a passage that's really easy for the student, and then a month down the line we might be reading a passage that's much harder. But then we just so the numbers might fluctuate a little bit, and that's why we want that probe data to support and kind of keep an eye on overall progress. But over time, we'd really like to see that level of support decrease. And if I'm not seeing that decrease, then I know that I need to do some troubleshooting. And I think having those 2 pieces of data is really helpful, because it doesn't mean anything if they can identify unknown words using context clues in a probe, but if they're not able to do that at all in context. So that's kind of why I use a combination of both of those. So I think those were all of the things that I wanted to share. I think that addressed all the questions that people brought up last week about data, but let me know if there's anything else. I'm happy to answer, and I will see you next week if we don't chat before then. Have an awesome week.